It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Matthew Tkachuk during the first pitch at the Marlins game on Monday and the comments he had to say after about getting ready for the season. Then we're going to talk about betting odds for major awards for the 2022-23 season. And we've been talking about all the biggest stories for the Florida Panthers this offseason. But now Jacob and I are going to rank our top 5 biggest stories for the Florida Panthers this upcoming season. We're going to discuss that more on today's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, September 14th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey and Locked On NHL. They'll be covering all the offseason activities around the National Hockey League. So, Cats fans, it's crazy. By the time this episode drops on Wednesday, we are going to be 29 days away from the start of the season. It won't be too. It's not too far away. Thomas Vokoun days away from the start of the season. You know, we got a prospect tournament showcase, that will be going on this weekend in Raleigh, North Carolina. The Panthers are making their way back to town, and it's just media day is next Wednesday, September 21st. It's this. All signs are pointing that hockey is back, and not only is hockey back, but it's just a great, exciting time for this region, and just really after the season the way it ended last year, it makes us all Panther fans just excited for what's to come because, despite everything that happened as far as trades and changes, it's still, the expectation is still there for this team. And let me bring in my guest, Jacob Winans, on right here on Locked On Panthers. Jacob, welcome back to the show, and glad to have you back on another Winans Wednesday.
Happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So 29 days, man. Let's get a little bit of a pulse check from you, my dude. How are you feeling about how we're less than a month now from puck drop at UBS Arena on October 13th against the New York Islanders?
Finally. Honestly, it's been a long off season. Even though, as far as days are concerned, it's shorter than we're used to for the Panthers, making it to the second round. A little bit shorter off season as far as dates as we're used to, but it's felt like it's been forever. So much has happened, and I'm thrilled to see what they look like when they hit the ice finally later on this month.
And speaking of that, I spoke as I introduced the show, talking about players starting to make their way back, and one of the players that have arrived, one of the newcomers of the Panthers, Matthew Tkachuk, the prize trade that Bill Zito made this offseason. And he threw out the first pitch at the Marlins game on Monday. The Marlins had a doubleheader game against the Texas Rangers, and Matthew Tkachuk threw out the first pitch in their second game of that doubleheader. And, talked a little bit about, not throwing out a first pitch anymore, not doing a warm-up and all that stuff. But mostly the main focus, of course, because this is Locked On Panthers, about really his approach towards this season and just being in the environment around South Florida. He's been back for like around 2 weeks now, and there's been talk about informal skates for the Panthers, just the teammates getting together. And one of the comments that he made, it was more later in his interview, was about how he's not worried about the getting acclimated to the guys in the locker room off the ice, which is really encouraging now that they're starting to get together before everything, all the lights turn on, as far as the media being there, official practices, training camp, tryouts, all that stuff. So great to see that they're already welcoming in the unicorn, as Bill Zito says.
Yeah, definitely. Tkachuk is not a guy that I worry about getting acclimated to the team. He's a culture changer. He's going to come in. He's going to be who he is on the ice, off the ice. He's a leader, a natural born leader, and his attitude is the type of attitude you want in the room. He's gonna be a big guy for the culture, big guy for the chemistry, and he's just such a good player. He's gonna make an impact right away. He makes his impact felt in so many more ways than just a score sheet, but he really has no trouble doing that either. So him getting acclimated was never a concern, but it's good to see him already being down here, getting involved with the Marlins. That's great. And I think it's exciting that the team is welcoming him in right away. I think a lot of that speaks to Alexander Barkov as a captain. Just his presence, his example. He's the type of guy who's just a fantastic teammate, and everyone is gonna kind of follow suit. So despite the fact that guys may miss Weegar, they may miss Huberdeau, none of that is held against Tkachuk or anyone else coming in brand new, and just welcoming in the new teammate, and I think he can make a difference right away.
Yeah, we saw both sides of the argument with you lose one, but you gain one. And Aaron Ekblad has been there was actually another article written about Aaron Ekblad's feelings on the trade. The first one that we spoke about here was the David Wilson article from the Miami Herald, but then he spoke to Daily Faceoff as well, talking about that same trade, and of course losing two of your friends and then gaining back somebody saying that he wants to win multiple cups. And also that just like how I asked you how excited are you about the season, Matthew Tkachuk is also on that same level. He's like, he just wants to fast forward to game one of the season. That's what he said in his interview right prior to throwing out the first pitch. But also the lifestyle for him. I know most of our talk really is about what they do off the ice, but of course, quality of life off the ice. The players talk about how it's probably the best place that they're ever going to live. But also asked about Calgary and their second round lumps, as well as for the Panthers, comparing both of them, because both of them bounced out in the same round, and talking about the lumps for the Panthers. It's even weird to say it in the same sentence for the Panthers, that now it's like we were talking about for years about getting out of the first round, and now the conversation has changed about getting out of the second round. But as a fan, as fans as us covering this team and talking about this team, we know that this is a playoff team on paper, and then it's really, part of me just wants to skip the 82 games and just deal with the business in the postseason. But Matthew Tkachuk's response, it also takes you into the mind of a hockey player. He talks about how the Panthers can't even think about that. You just want to go to game one, start this new journey, get acclimated to the players, and just try to get better every day. And that response is something that I could really appreciate from Matthew Tkachuk, about the level-headedness that this guy has.
I agree. I think we get kind of spoiled, and we get that way kind of quickly when we've made it to the postseason a couple of years in a row. It almost gets to a point where you feel like, hey, the playoffs that's the main goal. The regular season is just a formality. Let's just get to the playoffs and get there healthy. It's important to not have that mentality in the locker room. You cannot overlook anyone. You can't look ahead to the playoffs. You have to take every game seriously as if it is a playoff game. And Matthew Tkachuk is a guy who is always going to be thinking like that. The guy just loves the game. He brings maximum effort to every game he plays. You can tell that from watching his time in Calgary. He's not a guy who takes games off. And you add another player like that with his skill level, but also that mentality of let's handle our business and we're not going to look ahead to anything else. That can only be a positive thing. So while we as fans might be watching and saying, hey, let's just get to April, let's get to May, let's get to the business at hand in the playoffs. the players can't afford to think that way, and Matthew Tkachuk definitely is not showing any signs of that.
Yeah, you talk about natural born leader earlier about, we talked about his dad all the years in St. Louis, Arizona. His brother Brady's the captain of the Ottawa Senators as well. And there's chances that Matthew Tkachuk, I wouldn't doubt it if even in year one we see the A on his jersey. I wouldn't doubt that one bit. So it's just really exciting to have a guy and a guy who has personality as well, who's just who's, and we even go back to really from the start of his Panthers tenure, just that quote, and it was shared on the Bally Sports Marlins feed. Just 5 seconds. I hate Edmonton, but I hate Tampa more, and that was just the one that caught our eyes, and it markets that rivalry a lot more, and it's just really exciting.
Yeah, he's a marketable superstar. Barkov, for everything he is on the ice, he's not exactly a guy off the ice who loves the attention. He doesn't love the media. He doesn't love the spotlight. Tkachuk thrives in it. He loves the attention on him. He's not afraid to talk a big game, and he usually backs it up. He's not afraid to make enemies on the ice, and
that's for sure.
He definitely throws some comments out there that make headlines, and in a market like South Florida where the Panthers play, that's great. South Florida, the Miami sports market is a market well known for culture and attitude, and teams that have a lot of fire and attitude and that mentality, the fans gravitate to it. You think of the successful Heat teams. All the fan favorites were guys like Udonis Haslem, Chris Birdman Anderson. These are guys who are mixing it up every night and getting into all the extracurricular stuff, and the fans feed off of that. Same with the swagger that the Miami Dolphins had in the past, the Miami Hurricanes have had in the past. It's a culture of toughness and swagger off the ice or off the field or off the court, and Tkachuk brings that. I think he can draw a lot of fans into this sport just by being so marketable in that way.
Oh, no doubt. And you mentioned with the Hurricanes and Dolphins. I mean, even though UM wasn't winning a lot during the turnover chain was something that was that a lot of people even wore T-shirts about and even bought their own. So like the vibe that South Florida brings is definitely big, and Matthew Tkachuk can definitely bring some of that swagger to the Florida Panthers. But it's exciting. It's exciting. Just over a week before the Panthers hit the ice for training camp on September 22nd. But now, before we get into training camp, next segment we are going to talk about the betting odds for individual awards and where do the Florida Panthers rank as far as their chances to win individual awards. But first, we're going to tell you all about Betonline. And betonline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest sports, football league developments, game matchups, and podcasts, including this week's opening week games. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events include MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Jacob. I got an email today from my personal email from betonline.ag, and it was betting. We've been talking about betting odds a lot throughout the offseason about Panthers' chances to get out of the Eastern Conference, which last time I checked, they were favored to actually get out of the Eastern Conference. We were shocked about that, about their win total being their over-under win total. But now we have some betting odds based on the major awards, and for the people on the YouTube, I'm gonna share a screenshot of a screen share of betting odds via betonline.ag, and gonna read it out loud for the people on the podcast. So BetOnline for major awards. For the Hart Memorial Trophy, Alexander Barkov has a 22-1 odd to win the Hart. Matthew Tkachuk is 50-1. Vezina, Sergei Bobrovsky is a 25-1 to get the Vezina trophy, while Spencer Knight is at 100-1. The Norris is for Aaron Ekblad is 12-1. Rocket Richard, the most goals in the NHL. Barkov is at 22-1, and Jack Adams, this one was probably at first was the most shocking one for me, but I kind of understand why that the odds are 8-1. Jacob, let's start with the least likely to happen, in our opinion. As far as the least likely award to win for these listed, I think the one that is least likely to happen of all of these is probably Sergei Bobrovsky winning the Vezina at 25-1. He's won it twice, but I don't know. I don't know if we're ever going to see Vezina Bob again. But even seeing the Bobrovsky that we saw last season, I'm not expecting a Vezina Bob going into year 4 of his contract.
No, I think it would be unrealistic to expect a Vezina caliber season out of Bobrovsky at this stage, for a couple of reasons. One, he's getting older. It's no secret his best, like the very peak of his prime, is behind him. It doesn't mean he's not a starting caliber goalie. It doesn't mean he's not an above average starting caliber goalie. It doesn't mean he's not capable of still being a star goalie. But the Vezina's for the best goalie, and Bob plays in a division that has Andrei Vasilevsky still. We're in the Atlantic Division, which is a difficult division to have that kind of performance. And you know, it's a high scoring division, high scoring conference. So I don't expect him to have a Vezina caliber season. And another reason is just the defense. The Panthers lost a couple of key pieces on defense, including Mackenzie Weegar. Ben Sherratt is no longer a Panther, so there's a lot of moving parts defensively. The Panthers play a run and gun style, maybe not as much as last year, but they will still be an offensive driven team. That's gonna make things a little bit difficult for Bob to have as many shutouts and sub 2-goal games that you look for in a Vezina winner. So not necessarily a knock on Bob, but just the play style and the depth on the defense. I don't see him having a Vezina caliber season.
Yeah, and you hit the nail right on the head about the defense in front of Sergei Bobrovsky. We still think there's going to be, and it's crazy because even after getting hit with a puck in the mouth against he was not starting versus the LA Kings, and that caused him to miss a week. He still got one of the stars of the month that month, and got 2 shutouts all in that month. So there's encouraging signs that we could see splashes of Vezina Bob, and we're likely gonna. It's likely gonna be a repeating those repeating words saying that we saw Vezina Bob tonight, but it's not going to be every single night, and that's okay for the Florida Panthers. If there was I had to think about this one as far as most likely to happen as far as major awards to win. At first I said Paul Maurice winning to Jack Adams was the most likely of all of these, but then I flipped it. I flipped it to Aaron Ekblad winning to Norris. It's just I know the Panthers lost a lot, and a lot of national media people are down on the Panthers, but there's not a lot of writers. There's very few that think that this isn't a playoff team on paper. And so it's the way the Jack Adams, of course, it's a team. It goes to the coach that's teams exceeded expectations by like a lot. I don't think there's I don't think for the Panthers, if they do exceed expectations, I don't think it's going to be by a wide margin. So I'm going to go with Aaron Ekblad. There was a point in the season where he was, he was at a point per game pace. He was just a few points off before he went down in the regular season. I still don't think Aaron Ekblad, where he is. I think he'll be a finalist, but I'm not. But of course, when you have the Cale Makars of the world and Roman Yossi's of the world, if they still perform the way that they have, it's going to be a lot harder for Aaron Ekblad to win the Norris. But I can picture Aaron Ekblad being a finalist for the Norris.
I agree. I think Cale Makar is still the odds-on favorite to win it. I think Victor Hedman is slowing down a bit. It's hard to say he's slowing down much because he's still a top 5 defenseman in the game. But I don't think Victor Hedman ends up being a finalist this year. I think Roman Josi will be a finalist again. The one player that I think Ekblad is directly in competition with to get that last finalist spot is going to be Adam Fox in New York. I think Makar and Josi are probably shoo-ins, and then you got Ekblad in the mix competing with Fox and Hedman for that last finalist spot. I think Ekblad statistically may take a step backwards this year, given that he is going to be playing with a new D partner. He has been with Mackenzie Weegar for the past couple of seasons, and they developed some great chemistry. It allowed Ekblad to really take off statistically. But I think there is the potential for him to be even better playing with Gustav Forsling. Everything really depends on how much chemistry they can develop in a short amount of time. And then of course, Ekblad's injuries have been the thing that's held him back the most. The past 2 years, he hasn't finished the regular season. He's missed significant time. So we'll see if he can have a full 82 game season or something close to it. But if you ask me what I think is most likely out of those awards, I think Barkov for Hart is the one I'm going to go with. I think he was a shoo-in to be a finalist if he doesn't injure his knee against the Islanders early in the season. I really think this could be the year Barkov breaks through and becomes a Hart Trophy finalist and maybe even wins it. Yeah,
and his point pace last year was at missed 15 games, but his point pace was at a 110 last season, and that of course not to the McDavid level of contribution, but still. I know when it came to the Hart back in the Gretzky days, voter fatigue wasn't really that much of a thing because I think Gretzky won it like eight times in a 10-year span, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know if voter fatigue is going to be a thing for Connor McDavid. These are just things we can't predict. It just, 2021. 2020. Let's go back to 2021. What would I wonder? I don't know what Connor McDavid's point pace would have been in a full 82 game season, but he had like over 100 points in 66 games. and if he gets back to that level, and of course with a better goaltender, it's gonna be really hard for Barkov to step over Connor McDavid.
I agree. McDavid's the best player on the face of the earth. As long as he has Leon Draisaitl and at least somewhat competent wingers, he's going to be probably another Art Ross trophy in the bag. And then Austin Matthews, again, is right there. Nathan McKinnon is right there. Those three guys, any of those three guys are tough to top. But Barkov is 100% in the conversation with any one of them. He is on that level. And I think this year he's going to have a lot of responsibility. He's going to have to be the team's ultimate leader. He's going to have to probably lead them statistically in just about every major category offensively, and it's a good challenge for him. I think he's ready for it. I think he has what it takes to be that cornerstone player and finally get that recognition in the Hart voting.
And even though he's had the C on his sweater for the last few seasons, now with Huberdeau gone, it was never a debate for me who the unquestioned who the leader was in the locker room for sure, even with the C on his chest. But now with Huberdeau gone, it's definitely for sure he is the 100% unquestioned leader in this locker room, and of course he's the guy who puts the work on the ice. Doesn't really say too much as far, at least in front of the cameras, but knows that he is going to be a guy who gets to work. That's for sure. But this was fun. This was fun, Jacob. Talking about which one is most likely going to happen of the major awards. But we have a segment that's coming up that's even more fun than this one, in my opinion. And we might have some disagreements here. And we might have some agreements here, and we're going to talk about all the major stories for the Panthers this coming up this upcoming season. We've talked about them all offseason, but now Jacob and I are going to rank our top 5 major stories for the Florida Panthers this coming season. So stay tuned right here on Locked On Panthers.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, Jacob. We've had a few months. The last Panthers game was back in May, and now 4 months later, of course, it's almost here. And we've been talking about all different types of topics this season, from the coaching change to being bounced from the second round, goalies, defense core. But now it's time to rank our top 5 biggest stories for the Florida Panthers coming up this season. Number 5 for me, as far as the biggest story, is Panthers being up against the cap. That is my number 5 biggest story for the Panthers. And it really reflected on the moves this offseason, and it really restricted them from what they could do, and they had a lack of flexibility. And of course, you still do Keith Yando's buyout over again. So number 5, Panthers up against the cap. And also to include this, the Panthers at the trade deadline is going to be a little difficult for them. So that is my number 5 biggest story for the Panthers.
I agree with that. I don't have that as my number 5, but that's definitely a major storyline going in. We all thought Hornquist was going to get traded to free up some room. It didn't happen, and it's going to be tough for the Panthers to make any moves at the deadline. They don't have a ton of prospects and no draft picks really to trade. We'll see what Bill Zito can pull off, and we're going to see if any of these guys we brought in are diamonds in the rough. I've got 2 honorable mentions before I get to my number 5. Honorable mention number 1 I have as our what do the D pairs look like? That's a big question mark. We're going to see what the defense looks like going in. I also have 2 words as an honorable mention. I have redemption tour. We're going to see what the Panthers redemption tour looks like. What kind of season they are able to put together and how motivated they come in, given how they went out of the playoffs. But my number 5 biggest storyline going into next season is the play of Sergei Bobrovsky. Can he repeat what he did last year or improve on it? Bob has been the single biggest question mark since he was signed. He's been kind of polarizing. Some people are hard on him. Some people love him. Some people are in between. But however far the Panthers go, it almost all hinges on the play of Sergei Bobrovsky in net. So my number 5 biggest storyline is, can Bob repeat his above average, borderline all-star level play from last season?
I actually have that as my number 4 biggest storyline for the Panthers. Is like, can Bob have a repeat of last year? And of course, what's going to be the workload like with Spencer Knight and his upcoming deal that he's going to be an RFA next season? And is there a pathway to the Florida Panthers either keeping that with the keeping that contract with the cap rising, hopefully, as Bill Daly spoke about a few weeks ago, in a few years, so that is not as much of an anchor? Or are the Panthers going to try to develop someone like Alex Lyon in the system and then eventually have a Spencer Knight Alex Lyon tandem as well?
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. Not even necessarily just Alex Lyon, but the Panthers do have 2 really, really good young prospects in the pipeline. Yurasimyuk over in Russia has been fantastic at every level. He's expected to make the jump to full-time KHL this year. So that's widely known as the second best league in hockey worldwide. So we'll see how he does against pros in that league, and he very well could be the 1B to Spencer Knight as our future 1A. And then also they got a pretty good goalie in the U.S. National Team Development Program in this draft. So we got 2 guys in the pipeline that can potentially make some noise. My number 4, I got the forward combinations with Anthony Duclair's injury. That's my number 4 storyline.
Oh, good one.
Anthony Duclair getting hurt was a complete curveball. No one really, that was not at all planned for as far as roster development. It came in a freak accident in off-season training, a torn Achilles while Duke was putting in work in the off-season training. So injuries happen. Sometimes they happen at unfortunate times. The silver lining is that it happened in the off-season, so the Panthers did have an opportunity to put together a plan and hopefully patch up some holes in the roster. You'd hate to see it happen during the season, so it's better that it happened in the off-season, and a lot of his recovery time is actually off-season. But with Duclair out, where does that production come from? Who's going to be the one to step up? I think everyone is going to have their eyes on the top 6 right wing spot when training camp opens. We're going to see who's able to step up and fill that role where Anthony Duclair is missing until he's able to get back.
Yeah, and even if Rhino goes into the top spot on the right wing, it's gonna leave somewhere on that second or third line as well. So it's a ripple effect for this team. So it's funny because I didn't have that as one of my biggest stories, but that's a really good one, Jacob. And this segment is all about there's no right or wrong answers here. So Cats fans, if you want to also list your top 5 biggest stories heading into the season, at me at LO_FLA Panthers, MondoMan12, and at Jacob Winans 8 to share your top 5 biggest stories for the Panthers. Number 3, I have how Matthew Tkachuk is going to fit on this roster. As long as Matthew Tkachuk is on the team, him and Huberdeau are always going to be connected with each other. They will forever be connected as far as production, as far as did Bill Zito make the right move by going for the younger guy at a cheaper cap hit. And same thing with Brad Treliving on the other end for Calgary is how is he going to recover from 2 players who didn't want to be in Calgary long term in Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk? Johnny Gaudreau going to Columbus, of course. Matthew Tkachuk coming to the Panthers as well. These are 2 players who are consistently going to be connected.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point. Anytime there's big trades like this anywhere in sports, you tend to compare and watch these players' careers really closely as they develop, so you can get the satisfaction of who won that trade. And the Panthers are not immune to it. It's going to be like that. November 17th is going to be absolutely crazy. The first head-to-head and the return of Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar to South Florida. My number 3, this might be a somewhat underrated storyline, but to me, it's crucial to the Panthers season. I've got development, but specifically, there's 3 guys that their development could make or break this season.
I can guess 2 of them.
Go for it.
Denisenko, Heponiemi.
You got 1.
Oh, okay.
So for development, I've got 3 guys here. I've got Spencer Knight. That was the obvious.
Okay.
I've got Gregory Denisenko, and I've got Anton Lundell. If Lundell is able to turn that curve into being a superstar center or even just a top 6 center, now the Panthers are absolutely elite down the middle. They've got Barkov, Bennett, and Anton Lundell as your 3 centers, and then behind them is Eetu Luostarinen, who is a borderline 3C right now anyway. So however much development and Anton Lundell has put in, his development curve could accelerate or decelerate the Panthers' championship window here. I think a strong offseason, him turning into Barkov light quicker than later, could be huge for the Panthers' success, Spencer Knight, of course, his development is important. We've been watching it for years. He's supposed to be the goalie of the future. So, again, we're going to watch to see if he's going to make a jump. But, yeah, like you said, you hit it on the head. Gregory Denisenko, he's the guy that I'm watching developmentally to see if he's going to finally live up to his draft stock. Can he put a healthy season together? Can he produce in North America? Can he crack the NHL roster? Going into training camp, I think all eyes are on Denisenko to see what he's capable of because, again, if he can become that guy and he can fill in on a third line or a second line and produce, the Panthers just got extremely, extremely dangerous, especially when Duclear gets back. Now we're talking about having one of the deepest rosters offensively in the entire league again. So that's my third most important storyline.
What do all three of those guys have in common? They're first round picks.
Yep.
So and Denisenko, we've talked a little bit about him, of course, coming back from an injury as well. So that big storyline for the Panthers. Number 2, mine is how Paul Maurice is going to get the best out of this group, and of course, there's a lot of at this point now, with a few months of the Panthers now getting swept from the Tampa Bay Lightning, we saw of course it was obvious the out coaching that happened in that whole series between Andrew Brunette and John Cooper, and even in the first round, that about preparation for the team, and of course making adjustments not as quickly as Bruno wanted to. But now for the Panthers, and there wasn't too much as far as the players on social media, but we can only take so much of social media about welcoming Paul Maurice to the Panthers. There was a different buzz with Joel Quenneville, but obviously Joel Quenneville came with a different buzz, being a 3-time Stanley Cup champion, versus Paul Maurice only getting to the Stanley Cup final once. So there isn't that same hype for Paul Maurice coming here, and of course this fan base is pretty divided on the acquisition of Paul Maurice as the head coach. So how is Paul Maurice going to get the best out of this group?
Yeah, I have number 2. Is Paul Maurice the guy? That's the biggest question, or second biggest question I have going into the Panthers training camp. That's a huge storyline. Did they make the right decision in hiring Paul Maurice? I don't think Andrew Brunette was ready to be the head coach of a contending team. That's not any disrespect to his head coaching future or his ability as a coach, but I do think it's telling that he went laterally to a new job. I think going to the New Jersey Devils to be an assistant. I think the consensus around the league was that Brunette is an assistant coach right now with a very, very bright head coaching future, just not right now. So moving on from Brunette and bringing in Paul Maurice, it's a really big storyline. It's a calculated risk. We'll see if it pays off. I have a lot of respect for Paul Maurice as a coach. What he did in Winnipeg was great. What he did in Carolina was great. Is he the guy? That's what we're all going to be watching. Do the players respond to him? Is his system enough? Is his system enough of a change for the Panthers to implement this and get deeper into the playoffs, maybe win a cup? We're gonna see how well they blend. I'm excited for it. I think Paul Maurice is a great coach. We're just gonna see if he's the right fit here, and that's my number 2 storyline.
And let's consider the fact that Lindy Ruff for the New Jersey Devils, he's likely on the hot seat this season. We haven't talked too much about metropolitan teams on this show too much, but on paper, I'm really liking what the New Jersey Devils are doing. Ken McKenzie Blackwood bounced back this season, and if also the centers of Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier as well, they add Andre Palat, and also with he'll be a head coach again, I'm very sure. And if Lindy Ruff's New Jersey Devils don't start off well, we could very well see Andrew Brunette having another interim head coach coaching position very soon for that. And same thing with and going back to Paul Maurice, like you said, got to a Stanley Cup final with the Carolina Hurricanes, was part of a move from the Hartford to Carolina, so stayed with the franchise all throughout all those years. Was a few points off of the President's Trophy during his time in Winnipeg as well. So you got to be doing something right if you're getting that far. Of course, as far as being consistent as well and making the playoffs consistently, can he do that with a contending team? Number one story for me is the defense core in front of Sergei Bobrovsky / Spencer Knight. That is my biggest story of the offseason because of course, Matthew Tkachuk, great story. Being able to trade him. I'm not necessarily mad about giving up a first because you're getting 8 years worth of a guy. But you lost a little bit. And includes a guy who's part of a number one pair, and he's likely gonna be on the number one pair as well in Calgary. Has really developed well from being the 6th to last pick, going from the ECHL all the way to top pair defenseman, and now he's back on a contending team. But of course, the contract situation that is with Huberdeau and Weegar made that move make sense for the Panthers as far as their cap of $15 million going next season. But the question is how consistent can someone like the Lucas Carlsons of the world be a consistent part of this lineup? Matt Kiersted, John Lugvid, Max Gildan, will they be able to come up and fill spots here and there? Of course, they got a veteran in Mark Stahl who eats up minutes, especially on the penalty kill. Of course, a little bit older, of course. And of course, Radko Gudas, he led the league in hits, but how is he able? Is he going to be suitable on the second pair? I see Radko Gudas more on the third pair long term for this team. So the defense core for the Panthers is really the biggest story. How are they gonna break out on the rush? How are they gonna be at their own end in their board battles as well? Are they gonna lose their man, etc.?
I agree. That's a huge question mark. I think the answers may be, like you said, I think the answers may be within the team. Gustav Forsling is a guy who was a waiver claim, was not expected to be much of anything. The Panthers picked him up, took a flyer on him, and now he's our first pair left side defenseman. Can the Panthers get that kind of development out of a guy in-house? Lucas Carlson's going to have an excellent chance to do that. He's going to get the opportunity. Matt Kiersted's another one. Max Gildan is another one. They definitely have some AHL guys and fringe NHL talents who may be ready to make that jump and see if they can carve out full-time roles. But I think the biggest answers to those questions are in two guys. It's going to be Gustav Forsling and it's going to be Brandon Montour. We're going to see how much of a jump those two players can make. Can Brandon Montour step up into a second pairing role? He really showed something, some incredible play when Aaron Ekblad went down. He stepped up quite a bit this year, became a surprise. Can he be a full-time second pairing defenseman? Is Gustav Forsling ready to be a first pair defenseman, and is he durable enough to play those kind of minutes? He's a smaller guy. So we're going to get the answers to these questions, but they definitely have enough talent to make the playoffs. It's just going to be a matter of who's going to develop enough for us to be not just a playoff team, but a contending team. So that's a really good storyline going into next season. My number one is, you touched on it. It is the arrival of Matthew Tkachuk and the departure of Huberdeau and Weegar, plus Cole Schwindt. I really did like Cole Schwindt. I feel like he doesn't get talked about enough as part of that trade. I was very high on him. I think he's going to be a great NHL role player. I think he's going to carve out a nice spot for himself in the league, playing on third and maybe even second lines for a really solid NHL career. But the departure of Mackenzie Weegar and Jonathan Huberdeau for Matthew Tkachuk, it's the biggest storyline of the offseason. It's going to continue to be the biggest storyline during the regular season. We're going to be talking about who won that trade probably for the next 5, maybe even 10 years. When these guys' careers end, we're still going to be talking about who won that trade, who finished with more cups, who won more awards, who finished with more points. That's just the nature of the business. So that's the biggest storyline for me. we're all going to be closely watching the contract situation. Obviously, Huberdeau has already signed for 8 more years in Calgary. What's Mackenzie Weegar going to do? What does his cap hit end up looking like? Can we then understand a little bit more about why they both had to go? Common sense says the Panthers couldn't keep both. There may be a possibility that the Panthers couldn't keep either. Salary-wise, they're both up around 30 years old. You're talking about long-term commitments at high dollar, and does that close the Panthers' window to compete if they dish out those contracts? So I think Bill Zito did the best he could given the circumstances. It's unfortunate that Huberdeau and Weegar's ages didn't necessarily align with the rest of the Panthers' core as far as competing. Tkachuk does perfectly. But yeah, it's a big storyline. We're going to see how their contracts develop. We're going to see how they fit in Calgary. We're going to see how competitive Calgary looks this year. And that is, I guess to all of us, that's Florida Panthers West right now. We're gonna see what those guys look like. And I'll say this storyline could become even more huge with both teams being expected to contend. It is not that far-fetched to think of a scenario where these two teams meet in a Stanley Cup final, and wouldn't that be crazy? That would
storylines.
Yeah, that would be the biggest story, and yeah, that would be the biggest story in hockey in a long, long time. That would be something special. So that's my storyline to watch this year.
Mm-hmm. And as far as the expected lineups for the Florida Panthers every night, really only 3 players for the Panthers are really over the age of 30, at least the guys you expect to play every night. Of course, there's veterans that they signed, but likely going to have a few scratches here and there. At least the ones on the top of my head, Sergei Bobrovsky, Patrick Hornquist, and Radko Gudas. The majority of this team is mid-20s or below. So such a great situation for this young team to continue to grow. So definitely something to be excited as once again, training camp starts September 22nd. Media Day is September 21st. So exciting times just a week away from all of that. But Jacob, I want to thank you once again for joining me on this episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Yep, you can follow me online at Jacob Winans 8, and you can find my articles at pantherparkway.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacob.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome to be back.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Studio Roden. We'll be covering all the offseason activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure you listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a 30-minute daily podcast Monday through Friday on all things NHL. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.